Have you ever watched a movie trailer and wondered, why are they revealing so much about what happens in the story in the trailer? Why see the movie when the trailer seems to spoil everything that happens in the film? Recently, a friend of mine who teaches film at university showed her students the theatrical trailer for The Warriors, a stone-cold classic film from 1979 that you should absolutely watch if you haven't already. But when her students watched the trailer, their collective jaws hit the floor. Why don't they make trailers like that anymore? One student asked. Why did that make me genuinely excited to see this movie? Asked another. Now, whether or not the movie trailer that says too much is a recent phenomenon is a matter for debate. But what interests me about this topic is whether or not limiting this question to trailers is too narrow. What if we expanded the question of revealing too much of a story to storytelling itself? Do modern films, TV shows, and other forms of media tell us too much? When you consume a story, is the state of knowing necessarily better than not knowing? Or can an unanswered question be superior? Let's talk about that. Let's take a peek under the hood and see what makes a story memorable, special, timeless, however you want to call it, great. This is the Story Beat. Let's start by identifying what a story is. And for the purpose of simplicity, let's define a story as being comprised of 5 elements: who, what, where, when, and why. A story begins as a fog, an untold story that becomes clearer as the fog is lifted and the viewer becomes illuminated to these 5 elements. And already we have a flaw in our definition, because oftentimes some of these elements are more or less important than others. For example, most dystopian fiction requires an established or at least heavily implied when, and a mystery is typically a mystery because the audience learns the who and oftentimes how. But these are examples of unknowns that the storyteller is required to reveal to us. What happens when things are withheld, deliberately kept from the viewer's understanding? Well, in short, this can be precisely what we, the audience, truly want. If Christopher Nolan's 2008 The Dark Knight is remembered for one thing, it's the Joker, played memorably, hauntingly by the late Heath Ledger. So let's apply the 5 questions to him. Who? Well, the best answer we are given is the Joker. What? Violence, destruction, mayhem. When? Present day. Where? Gotham. Why? We never really get the answer. The film tosses several explanations at us to explain the Joker's deluge of violence and destruction, but these explanations repeatedly contradict one another, with the Joker even doing a complete 180 on his own plans. Or how about Anton Chigurh in No Country for Old Men? Beyond the surface-level goal of obtaining a satchel of money from a drug deal gone awry, the film repeatedly alludes to him as operating under a warped system of morality that is never fully explained. In other words, the who behind the who is largely left a mystery, which in turn forces the viewer to fill in the blanks. To think about those questions independently and oftentimes well after the initial story experience, in my opinion, is precisely what makes them memorable. Whether through character, dialogue, action, or all of the above, you remember the times when a story engaged with you in a way that caused you to think about what you were being told, and most importantly, what you weren't. Here, let me show you one of my favorite examples of this, being done eloquently and subtly from the highly acclaimed show about cops and drug dealers in West Baltimore, The Wire.
You want it to be one way.
Man, I don't
want
know
it to
what
be one
Man,
way.
stop!
Stop saying that. What is the other way?
You want it to be one way, but it's the other way. What does that mean? Well, okay, that's not fair. I just showed you a single line of dialogue with absolutely no setup, context, or anything that could possibly explain it. So let me give you the context. This is Marlo Stanfield, the most powerful drug kingpin in the city, and this is a lowly security guard at a convenience store. He's never appeared in the show before this scene, they've never met or interacted with one another, but he just caught Marlo stealing a lollipop, followed him outside, and told him that he knows who he is and knows there's nothing he can do about it because of who he is. That's it. That's the entire context. So what does "you want it to be one way but it's the other way" mean? Well, the point is that what's the point is the point. There are entire video essays on YouTube offering explanations for what this exchange means, and maybe you could come up with some of your own. But in my opinion, writing that raises questions can oftentimes make the exchange between storyteller and story enjoyer worthwhile. And let me show you how I've tried to incorporate this into my writing. Here's a couple pages from Noirlem Listen, whose link is in the description at Barnes & Noble. In this scene, our main protagonist and amateur detective, Coleman Carmichael, is investigating a mysterious death and approaches a table of jazz musicians in a bar, trying to ascertain some information. Gentlemen, need to find a couple players who crooned the Upper West Side a few nights back. One of them replies by insinuating that Coleman is a rat, and that talking to him could result in their arrest. You boys hear something? Like a high-pitched squeak, squeak. Oh, it's just you, Coleman. No, I don't think we know any players, 'cause ain't none of us fixin' to put ourselves in bracelets. Coleman sits down and calmly responds, You surprised me, Jake. I couldn't get you to stop talking when you needed my help with, Whoa, hold on now, let's keep things respectable. Now, what's known and unknown here? Well, we've never seen Jake before, but it's implied that he and Coleman have interacted at some point in the past, and that Jake needed Coleman's help with something that he doesn't want anyone else at the table to know about. Do we need to know what that was? Would the inclusion of that information add anything to the exchange? Or is it actually better not knowing? This particular scene isn't consequential to the major points in the narrative. It exists simply to show the detective character being a detective. But at least in my opinion, a good piece of writing is one which is always engaging to the reader, whether it's building character, building suspense, or asking an unanswered question to the reader. And to be honest, I don't know if that's becoming a lost art, but at least it's one which I've gotten you to think about. And if you've got any bits and bobs that you get excited about storytelling, I'd love to hear about them in the comments. Thanks for watching.